there, today we're going to discuss solve two-step equations. What will we learn today? Today we're going to solve two-step equations, and then we're going to solve real-world problems involving two-step equations. To solve a two-step equation, our first step is to do the addition or subtraction first. And this is basically of our constants. And our constants are just basically our numbers. So we're going to undo the addition or subtraction of the numbers. And then step 2, we're going to undo the multiplication or division. Our final step that I think you should always do is to check your solution. So every time you get a solution, you need to plug it back into the equation to see if you're right, just to check your math, because sometimes we can get our math wrong. Okay, so our first example is 3a plus 9 equals 33. So our first step is to undo the addition or subtraction of our constants. So here's our variable. It's multiplied by 3. And it's added by 9. So first we want to undo the addition or subtraction of our constant, our number 9. So the opposite of add by 9 would be to subtract by 9 on both sides of the equation. Now I want you to notice that I line up my equal signs so that I make sure that I do the same operations to the left and to the right. Okay, so my plus my minus 9 cancels out to 0. So on the left I'm left with 3a. And then 33 minus 9 is 24. Okay, so now I'm left with 3 times a equals 24. Now I'm going to undo my multiplication of 3. And how I do that is I divide by 3 on both sides of the equation. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I'm left with a equaling 8. Okay, and again, when you get your answers, go back into the equation and plug in 8. So I'll say 3 times 8 plus 9, does that equal 33? Well, 3 times 8 is 24. Does that equal 33? Well, 33 equals 33, so it works. Okay, again, don't trust your math if you're doing it mentally. Make sure that, you get the right answer by plugging it back in. Here's another example, 2m plus 8 equals 32. So let's go ahead and undo my addition or subtraction of my constants. So the opposite of my plus 8 is going to be subtract 8 from both sides of the equation. Again, bringing down my equal signs, making sure that I do the same thing on the left and to the right. So plus 8 minus 8 cancels out to 0, so I'm left with 2m on the left. And on the right, I have 32 minus 8, and that equals 26. 24. Okay, so now I'm going to undo my multiplication of 2. So I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides of the equation. Notice that I'm using a fraction bar instead of the division symbol whenever I'm doing division. Okay, so 2 divided by 2 is 1, so m is going to equal 12. Again, check your solution, please, when you're doing these problems. Okay, so here's our next example, and this is a little different from what we just did because our coefficient right here is going to be a fraction. All right, so let's start off with our first step, and that's undo the addition or subtraction of our constant. So our constant here is 12. So to undo minus 12, I'm going to add 12 on both sides of the equation. All right, so minus 12 plus 12, that equals 0. So on the left, I'm left with 1/5 times p equaling 32. Okay, so now I'm going to take a look at this and say to myself, okay, well, my coefficient, or the number being multiplied by my variable, is a fraction. And to undo multiplying by a fraction, we're just going to multiply it by the reciprocal. And we learned that in our last lesson. So we're going to multiply it times 5 over 1. And then 5 over 1 times 1 over 5, that cancels out to just 1. So I'm left with p, and that equals 32 times 5 over 1 equals 160. Okay? All right, so here's another example that I'm going to throw at you. We have 1/4 times w plus 6 equals 9. So let's undo our addition or subtraction of our constant. So we have a plus 6. Let's subtract 6 to both sides of the equation. Okay, again, lining up my equal signs. Plus 6 minus 6 cancels out to 0. So I'm left with 1/4 W, and then 9 minus 6 is 3. All right, now I'm going to say to myself, my W is being multiplied by 1/4, and how I undo the multiply by 1/4, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, okay? So 4 over 1 times 1/4, that cancels out to 1, so I'm left with W equaling 12. Okay, and then check your solution again, just to make sure that your mathematic is right. Okay, so let's continue. We now have this example here. This is a very interesting example because of the fact that you really have to be knowledgeable about your coefficients and your constants. So our first step is to undo our addition or subtraction of our constants. So we have a 9 here. So how do we get rid of a positive 9? We're going to subtract 9 from both sides of the equation. So we have to really understand that we have to get rid of the numbers first. Okay, so 9 minus 9 is 0. Now be careful of your signs because this is actually negative t. Okay, equaling negative 34 minus 9, that equals negative 43. Okay, now what I want you to realize is that we're looking for the value of t, just t, and not negative t. So what you have to do is you have to be knowledgeable that if the variable doesn't have a coefficient in front of it, it's understood as 1. So negative t is actually negative 1 times t. So we want to have positive t. So we're going to divide by negative 1 because it's being multiplied by negative 1. So negative 1 divided by negative 1, that equals just 1. So now I'm left with t. And then negative 43 divided by negative 1 is positive 43. Again, you can check your solution again because sometimes we'll get a little confused with our signs. So just make sure that you check your solution. Here's another example. 5 minus x equals 7. So we want to get rid of our constant, which is a positive 5. So let's go ahead and subtract 5 from both sides of the equation. Again, bringing down my equal signs. 5 minus 5 is 0. So I'm left with negative x. And then 7 minus 5 is 2. So, again, we have to understand that if it doesn't have a number in front of the variable, it's understood as 1. So this is negative 1 times x. So to undo that, I'm going to divide by negative 1. So negative 1 divided by negative 1 is just 1. So x is going to equal negative 2. And again, check it again. So if I say 5 minus negative 2, does that equal 7? Well, 5 plus positive 2, that equals 7. So 7 equals 7. Okay? Alrighty. So let's continue on. These are going to be a little more difficult because it's going to pull your knowledge from simplifying expressions and combining like terms and also solving expressions. So if you kind of look here, we kind of have 3 terms here, 2x, positive x, and negative 27. But we'll notice that 2x and x are like terms. So if we ever have this kind of problem, we're going to combine our like terms first. So let's go ahead and take our 2x plus our x, and that equals 3x minus 27 equals 3. So now we have our two-step equation. Okay, so let's undo my addition or subtraction of my constant first. So to undo minus 27, I'm going to add 27 to both sides of the equation. Okay, again, keep your equal signs in line. So this cancels out to 0, so we have 3x, and that's going to equal 30. So let's undo our multiplication of 3 by dividing by 3 on both sides of the equation. And so 3 divided by 3 equals 1, so x is going to equal 10. Here's another example. Here we have like terms, and the like terms are b and negative 3b. So let's go ahead and combine those first before we proceed. So b plus negative 3b, that equals negative 2b plus 8, and that equals 18. Okay? So now what we're going to do is undo the addition or subtraction of our constants. So undo our plus 8. So let's subtract 8 from both sides of the equation. Okay, so plus 8 minus 8, that cancels out to 0. So I'm left with negative 2b, and then 18 minus 8 is 10. Now we're going to undo our multiplication of negative 2. So let's divide by negative 2 on both sides of the equation. So negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1, and b is going to equal negative 5. Okay. Here's our real life examples. Dion wants to go on a camping trip with his hiking club. The trip costs $185.75. He paid a deposit of $45.75 and will save an additional $17 per week to pay for the trip. Solve 45.75 plus 1750 times W equals 185.75 to find the number of weeks Dion will need to save the money for the trip. All right, so let's start off with our equation. Okay, so now what we have here is our two-step equations. We didn't have to combine any like terms. And the first thing we want to do is undo our addition or subtraction of our constant. Now our constant is $45.75. So what we're going to do is we're going to subtract $45.75 from both sides of the equation. Okay, so now what I'm left with on the left side now is $17.50 times the number of weeks, and that equals $140. Okay, now let's undo our multiplication of 1750. So 1750 is being divided on both sides, so this cancels out to 1. So W is going to equal 8 weeks. So he has to save for 8 weeks. Okay? All right, here's our last example, and it has to do with Marissa going to summer camp. The camp costs $229. She paid a deposit of $75 and will need to save $14 per week to pay for the trip. So, solve the equation 75 plus 14W equals 229 to find how many weeks Marissa will need to save. Okay, so then the first thing we're going to do, again, add or subtract our constants. So let's subtract 75 from both sides of the equation. So what we're left with is 14W on the left, and then 229 minus 75, that equals 154. Okay, now let's undo our multiplication of 14 by dividing by 14 on both sides of the equations. So W is going to equal 11, and so the answer is going to be 11 weeks. She needs to save for 11 weeks. Okay, so today we solved two-step equations. I hope that video is helpful. Thank you. Bye.